Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Garrett. I'm a support engineer here at Cloudflare. So today we're going to go over Cloudflare's performance features. These features are designed to decrease site load times and reduce overall bandwidth usage, meaning a snappier web experience for your visitors, which is what we all want. And this also means less strain on your servers, which reduces costs, and thus reduces your overall infrastructure needs, which is also what you want. So to start, we're going to go over a little bit of background on what Cloudflare is and what we do. All right, so Cloudflare is an internet-based reverse proxy that provides performance and security benefits to the web. So what exactly does that mean? It means that when you enable Cloudflare for your site, we sit in front of your origin server or servers and keep bad requests out while letting the good requests in. Because your traffic passes through our network, or what we call the edge, we can layer in many performance benefits at the click of a button. So today we're going to focus on those extra performance benefits. So let's dive in further into what Cloudflare is, as well as what services and features we offer. So Cloudflare offers a variety of major services like DNS, CDN, cryptography, security, as well as site and advanced optimization. Today we're mainly going to focus primarily on performance, specifically our content delivery network, which is the CDN, as well as our site and advanced optimization features. So let's jump right into what our content delivery network is and what features we have there. So our CDN in its most basic sense is a way to store or cache your static resources, such as images, style sheets, JavaScript, and have them closer to your visitors. So what I mean by closer to your visitors is that Cloudflare has a global network with over 100 data centers that each provide caching, thus bringing your cache resources geographically closer to any of your site's potential visitors. And this is on a global scale. So caching really just means that we hold on to a copy of those resources for a specific amount of time, and when your visitors request those assets, Cloudflare serves them instead of your server having to serve them every single time. So this means that each request through a Cloudflare data center can potentially lead to caching of those resources, as well as possibly more things like dynamic content when page rules are used. So our CDN features include cache levels, browser cache expiration, development mode, and purge cache. As I mentioned before, the CDN holds on to copies of static resources and serves those to your visitors instead of having to ask your server for those resources for every single visitor. So this helps to speed up your site load time, which tends to increase the time people spend on your site, as well as reduce bounce rates. The CDN features are available in your Cloudflare dashboard in the caching section. So next, let's dive into what exactly those CDN features are, and let's start with cache levels. So caching levels basically just tell Cloudflare how you'd like us to deal with certain static resources or URLs, really. So, and there's a couple different ones. So the first one is standard, which standard really just includes the query string when caching a resource. No query string, which basically bypasses caching for any resource that has a query string. And the query string, if you don't know, it's when you have like the little question mark, something equals something at the end of your URL. So, and then ignore query string is just as the name implies, it ignores the query string, thus caching a resource with different query strings as the same resource. Bypass cache, which is enabled through page rules, effectively disables caching for any resources that match that page rule. And then there's cache everything, which is also enabled through page rules and attempts to cache any resource, including HTML, that also match that page rule. So these settings tell Cloudflare how to cache your resources, but what about your visitors' browsers, right? So that's where browser cache expiration comes in, so let's discuss that next. So browser cache expiration sets how long your visitor's browser should hold on to a copy of those assets, just like, those images, style sheets, etc. that I talked about earlier. So this expiration can be set on your Cloudflare dashboard, but you'll want to take into account that a longer expiration may mean a faster load time for your visitors, but conversely slower update times when those files are modified. So, and this can also be set by your server using cache control headers in tandem with the respect existing headers option. All right, so now let's talk about development mode. Development mode temporarily bypasses caching for your site so that development changes are immediately apparent. It automatically terminates after 3 hours and can be disabled manually at any time. It's very useful to see changes immediately without having to wait for cache resources to expire or having to purge your cache, which is what we're going to talk about next. So purge cache allows you to remove all resources or just individual resources from Cloudflare cache. So the 3 available options are purge individual files, purge everything, as well as purge by tag, which is an enterprise-only feature. So just as the name specify, purge individual files is on a per URL basis, per asset. Purge everything expires all cache resources for your site, and purge by tag allows you to create basically groups of resources to be purged together by that tag name. So the things to remember here are that purge individual files doesn't support wildcards, but it is recommended over purge everything. And purge everything, as well as purge by tag, depending on the number of resources, may temporarily lead to increased resource usage on your origin server. So speaking of server usage and site performance, let's discuss site optimization next. So Cloudflare offers a range of features to help optimize your site and make sure your visitors get not only the fastest load time, but the best user experience. Our site optimization features include auto minify, image optimization with Mirage and Polish, gzip compression, HTTP2, as well as Rocket Loader. Site optimization features can be found mainly in the speed section, as well as the network section on Cloudflare.com. So let's jump right into it and talk about what auto minify does. So auto minify enables stream-based removal of unnecessary characters without modifying functionality. So as you can see in the example above, both whitespace and comments are removed, thus reducing the overall size of the resource while leaving the script functionally intact. So this is in the speed section on Cloudflare.com and can be turned on for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript independently. So while auto minify optimizes source code, our image optimization features reduce image size and load time. So let's discuss them next. Image optimization not only allows for compression of images on the fly, but also enables smaller images to be substituted on slower network. So Polish enables image compression with both lossless and lossy algorithms, removing unnecessary bytes from your images automatically. This, on average, can reduce file size by 35%. Mirage, on the other hand, enables smaller or low-resolution images to be presented to visitors on slower networks, like mobile networks, while the full-resolution image is still loading. So this gives faster load times on those lower bandwidth mobile networks, thus making your mobile visitors experience even better. So now that we've reduced overall image size, let's talk about reducing your server's network bandwidth usage with gzip compression. So gzip compression enables text-based resources to be compressed, which can reduce bandwidth and thus increase performance. Gzip is supported by most modern browsers, and they actually prefer it. This feature is enabled through accept encoding header, request headers. So there's no real on or off button. It's actually the visitor's browser who says, yeah, I want to use gzip. And as I said before, most modern browsers actually prefer it. So they will try to use it right away. So another feature that also allows for way faster load times is HTTP2, and that's what we're going to discuss next. So HTTP2 is the first major upgrade to the HTTP protocol in over 15 years. It allows for parallel loading of site resources instead of requesting resources one by one, which is how the initial version of HTTP worked. This enables an enhanced user experience as site load times are drastically reduced. It's available for all plans and can be toggled on or off in the network section on your Cloudflare dashboard. So last but not least, let's talk about another site optimization feature that also helps speed up site load time called Rocket Loader. So Rocket Loader automatically bundles JavaScript files, optimizing your pages to minimize the number of network connections and ensure even third-party resources won't slow down page rendering. So Rocket Loader is really beneficial for HTTP version 1 connections, as it allows JavaScript to be loaded asynchronously, thus increasing the site load time, or decreasing the site load time actually. Rocket Loader isn't necessary if there's no JavaScript on your page or if all connections already use HTTP2. So now that we've discussed our site optimization features, let's jump into some advanced topics and cover our advanced optimization features. So advanced optimizations do allow for drastic decreases in bandwidth with minimal overhead in configuration and maintenance. These features enable your site to run much faster, but do take a bit more setup and technical know-how to configure. The features include accelerated mobile links, which are great for publishers and static content authors, Railgun, which is for optimizing dynamic content, especially with like content management systems like WordPress. And then there's WebSockets, which are for real-time applications like chat and games. So our advanced optimization features live in both the speed and the network sections on your Cloudflare dashboard. So let's go ahead and jump right into AML. So accelerated mobile links, or AML, is powered by AMP technology, which activates AMP-enabled third-party links across your entire mobile website. This allows for your site to load these external AMP-enabled pages 3 to 5 times faster than normal mobile pages. So this means, again, a snappier and better overall experience for your mobile users. AML consists of 3 different aspects: the AMP HTML, the AMP JS, which is JavaScript, as well as the AMP cache. AML can be enabled in the speed section on your Cloudflare dashboard and can be turned on globally for your whole domain, or it can actually be enabled for just individual subdomains. All right, so now let's talk about our WAN optimization feature called Railgun. So Railgun is a business and enterprise feature that accelerates the connection between a Cloudflare data center and an origin server, so that requests that cannot normally be served by the Cloudflare cache, such as dynamic content, are nevertheless served extremely fast. So basically, it's a wide area network WAN optimizer, reducing bandwidth usage between your server and Cloudflare up to 99.9% for certain requests. So Railgun configuration does take some technical know-how, as there is configuration necessary and installation at your server. And it also does take a little bit of configuration on the Cloudflare dashboard. So that's why it is a little bit is an advanced feature. We have all the documentation for installation and configuration on the link on the slide, which is the cloudflare.com/docs/railgun. All right, so lastly, we're going to talk about WebSockets. WebSockets allow for real-time applications like chat, stocks, and games to communicate with Cloudflare without having to create multiple connections. So this bidirectional communication reduces redundant traffic, thus decreasing bandwidth usage, as well as increasing overall user experience, as users are faster and more timely. WebSockets may require configuration on your origin server, but after that, they can easily be enabled in the network section on your Cloudflare dashboard. So that's everything for our advanced optimization features. Thank you again for listening to our presentation on Cloudflare performance features. Hopefully you enjoyed our site and advanced optimization features discussion. If you encounter any issues with the features today, or any other features for that matter, feel free to reach out. We also have a knowledge base and blog articles available at support.cloudflare.com and blog.cloudflare.com. So now I'm going to go through and see if you have any chat questions.
Hey Garrett, thank you so much for that. And everybody, this is Becky again, your moderator. Feel free to please add your questions in the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And Garrett, I'm going to go ahead and just toss these out to you. So one question we have now is, where is gzip located in the interface? And while you're at that, why don't you answer also, how do I turn on and off gzip compression?
Okay, that's a great question. So as I mentioned before, gzip compression is something that your visitor's browser tells us to use. And so it's not really easily toggled on or off. It's actually able to be set by the browser itself. So the browser will send what's called a request header, which is accept encoding gzip, and it will basically say, hey, I want to use gzip compression. And Cloudflare will respond and say, okay, we've used gzip compression on this data that we're sending you. Here it is. And so it's not necessarily something that you can turn on or off in the Cloudflare interface, but it is something that your visitors can say, yes, I want to use this, or no. We do recommend just using it anyways, and like I said, most modern browsers actually prefer it as it's going to save bandwidth.
Fantastic. Next question is, so you talked a lot about caching resources. How can I tell that Cloudflare is caching a specific resource on your site?
Okay, so whenever Cloudflare is told to cache a resource, we actually add a response header called cf-cache-status. And if this header is not present in the HTTP response from Cloudflare, then we're not actually attempting to cache the resource at all. But if we are serving the resource from our edge servers, then you'll see the CF cache status header with a value of hit, so capital HIT. Otherwise, if we're still attempting to cache the resource, or potentially, you've told us this is cacheable but don't cache it, which can happen sometimes, then we'll actually serve what's called a miss, M-I-S-S. So remember that cache levels will most likely come into play here, so be aware of what cache level you've set globally or through page rules, because that tends to have the most effect on this.
Okay, thanks, Garrett. Next question is, how does Cloudflare deal with DDoS attacks, and what does it mean to be always online? And I know this is separate to the conversation today, but I think security is very important to overall performance.
Yes, I do too. So as I mentioned before, so Cloudflare sits between your visitors and your website. So basically how we deal with DDoS attacks is we're actually vetting every request that goes to your website. And so we can say, does this request look nefarious? Are they trying to attack this website? We can also say, is this a DDoS attack, right? Are we seeing something that is potentially going to flood the origin server, and are we going to block it? And so that's where, because we stand in between your visitors and your website, we can just say, yep, this looks like a DDoS to us. We're going to just drop that traffic, and your server will never see that traffic actually reach it. And so for Always Online, that's another feature we have. And basically how Always Online works is we have a crawler that will go and reach out to your website every so often. And so I believe enterprise customers are multiple times a day, and I think biz customers are like once a day or once every 3 days. I'll have to look at that. But basically what we do is we go out, just like Google, we would crawl your site and cache that content. And so if your website is down when we go to talk to it, basically we will serve that cached content. And so it doesn't actually cache everything. It doesn't, have a whole copy of your whole website, and it can't really do dynamic content, right? Because we don't have a copy of your internal database. We don't have a copy of, your internal source code. So we're really just going to take a snapshot of that and serve that to your visitors.
Great. And for the customers that are interested in security features and getting more in depth with that, we will actually be having a security-specific webinar next week. And if you're interested in attending, please fill out the form at the end of the presentation, and we'd be happy to invite you to that as well. So next question that I can see is I've turned on auto minify, but I'm not seeing any minification take place. What can I do here?
So our minification service, it will stop at the first perceived error in your source code, and that's usually the most common issue here. So for those instances, I'd recommend running your resource through like an HTML, CSS, or JavaScript validator, which there are plenty of them on the internet. You can actually just Google like JavaScript validator and see if there's any errors or warnings come back, because any of those could potentially stop auto minification from happening. And so you'll want to correct those and then try checking auto minification again, and that should solve the issue.
Awesome. Another one just came in. We use Joomla and also currently use Joomla internal cache. Should we turn off our cache since we now use Cloudflare? It's a great question.
So yeah, that is a good question. So we would work with that cache as well, right? So basically you have like a multi-level caching setup. It does make it a little bit more confusing, especially if you're trying to purge something, because now you may have to purge with Cloudflare, you may have to purge with Joomla, and so on. And so you just have to be aware of that it's going to cache locally, but we are actually going to request most likely from that cache, and so we should actually have the same copy. And so it would work no problem.
Awesome. And actually, Garrett, just thinking about this, is that a similar principle that you'd associate with other CMSs like WordPress or anything else like that?
Mm-hmm. So WordPress has what is it, WP total cache, I believe, or W3 total cache, and that same idea. So it's just another level of caching, and so if that's the kind of setup that you want to go for, we completely are compatible with that, no problem.
Awesome. Okay, another question just came in. I've enabled Rocket Loader on automatic mode, but my site is having difficulty with certain JavaScript files. What can I do to fix it?
All right, awesome question. So JavaScript files don't play nice with Rocket Loader. Some of them don't play nice with Rocket Loader sometimes, and they may need to be excluded. And so this can be done by modifying your HTML code or your JavaScript code and adding the data-cf async equals false. And so we have all this written on our knowledge base article, and you can go out and search for Rocket Loader not working. And you would just add that attribute in your script tag prior to the source attribute, and that will actually tell Rocket Loader to ignore that script, and it won't be applied there. So, and as I said, you can find more about this in our knowledge base when you search, how do I have Rocket Loader ignore my scripts while in automatic mode?
Great. I see another really interesting question about one of our advanced features. I've turned on AML for my site, and I don't see any AMP-enabled pages when I'm browsing. Why is that happening?
So AML only works with AMP-enabled pages that are external to your site. So for instance, if you link to an AMP-enabled article on a third-party website, this one then that would be accelerated by Cloudflare as an AML page, right? So it's all about the external pages, because we actually have, as I mentioned before, the cache everything, where basically you can tell Cloudflare to cache any HTML page you like with cache everything. AML is built to basically hold on to a copy of external pages to your site. And so you link to an AMP-enabled article, you tell us that you have AMP on your site, and we would then cache those external pages for you and serve those to your visitors. So that's how you get that performance gain there, and that could be the potential reason why AMP wouldn't be working.
Great. So I've come to the end of the chat questions that I can see. I'll give everybody another minute to type in anything that they might want Garrett to answer, but otherwise, this has been an awesome session. And several more have come in. Okay. Should I have IPv6 on, and if so, why?
So great question. And yes, if you are IPv6 compliant, we definitely think so. Most visitors browsers, most modern browsers are totally IPv6 compliant and have no problem with it. The biggest benefit is it's actually faster than IPv4, especially with SSL connections. So we do recommend it at all costs. We also do, so if your server perhaps doesn't support IPv6, we have a solution for that as well, which is called pseudo IPv4, where basically what we do is when a visitor comes in with an IPv6 connection, we actually translate that to an IPv4 address, and then we use that address to talk to your server. So you still have a unique address, and you're still supporting IPv6 for your visitors.
Fantastic. And actually, somebody just had a follow-up question about should I use pseudo IPv4 with IPv6, but hopefully that answered it. And if it did not, please follow up. The other follow-up that I can see now is how do I know if my server does support IPv6?
So that is a great question as well. I would ask your hosting provider about that, because it depends on your server and their network, right? So they're going to be the most authoritative on actually knowing whether or not your server is IPv6. But you can also just try to connect to your server and see if it has an IPv6 address. So IPv6 addresses are actually normally quite long, and they have semicolons in them, or colons, I guess, yes. Whereas IPv4 is 4 different digits with periods in between. So that's the big difference. So if you see an IPv6, most likely your server supports it. But do remember that Cloudflare might be in between and you're speaking IPv6 with Cloudflare instead of your server.
Great. One question is in regards to other webinar topics. When would we have one on the analytics section? That is great feedback. We don't currently have one specific to our analytics section, but it will be partially covered in a webinar to come in a couple weeks. If you are interested in that, please again do fill out our survey at the end of the that you will receive via email, and we'll make sure to include you in any upcoming webinar sections. In the meantime, there is great resource on our analytics section and how to use and interpret it via our knowledge base. Awesome. So again, I'll wait and hold here for a few seconds to see if there's any more questions via chat. Otherwise, again, this has been a wonderful session, and we really appreciate everybody's engagement with it. Some really fantastic questions today. Great. It looks like they have slowed down, Garrett, unless there was anything else that you wanted to address today.
So all I was going to say is thanks everyone for joining us, and hopefully now you have a better grasp on how to use Cloudflare and take your site's performance to the next level. And thank you again for your attention today.
Fantastic.
Oh, there is one more.
One more. What is enable query string sort?
So that function, I would actually have to dig into it more because I'm not 100% on that, but I believe that one is actually what we do is when you have multiple query strings on your resource, on your URL. So we will actually sort it for you depending on how you tell us to do that. And again, on the knowledge base, we should have an article that actually lists out. I believe that's an enterprise feature, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Appreciate that, Garrett. And to the customer who just asked that question, we can follow up after this with any knowledge base articles specific to that question as well. Okay. All right. They keep coming. A lot of engagement today. Is WebSockets necessary with WordPress alone?
So it's not necessary if you don't have it configured or don't need it. It's definitely not necessary. WebSockets is very beneficial for, like as I mentioned, like real-time applications, but it may require some configuration on your origin server, which your hosting provider should be able to help you with. But it's not at all necessary. It could potentially help depending on some of the plugins that you're using with WordPress, but for the most part, just a plain WordPress instance, it probably won't really do too much for you. I would look at things like Railgun or other caching options. We also do have a WordPress plugin that you can download that should also help to automate some of your WordPress stuff. So I would look into that over WebSockets. But again, if you have real-time applications in your WordPress, you might look into WebSockets in more depth. And again, support.cloudflare.com for our knowledge base.
Great. Another question, again, about Joomla specific setup. Does Railgun work well with Joomla, and would there be a benefit to implementing that in your perspective?
Yeah, so Railgun works with pretty much any origin-based web application. Its real benefit is that it's basically it's a WAN optimizer, as I said before. So what it does is basically there's a Railgun server and a Railgun listener. And the Railgun listener lives on your server or in your hosting provider's network. And what happens is those two servers basically cache requests. And so what we do is we send just the difference. So if, say, someone requests a page, and so that whole page has to be sent through the network. But then if someone requests that same page again, Cloudflare now has a copy of that page. And Cloudflare can say, hey, Railgun that's at the origin, do you have a copy of that page, and is it different from what I have? And if the origin responds, oh, okay, well, I've got a copy of it, and it's not different from yours, then you would actually not have to send any data across. and that's where you can get, 99.9% compression, where really no data is having to be sent because we're only really sending the difference in the page. So, but yes, going back to Joomla, it should work no problem with it.
Great. Thanks for that, Garrett. We still do have open time on the webinar, so we're happy to stay around if there's any additional questions. Please let us know, but it looks like things have slowed down again. Thank you all so much for joining us. This has been a lot of fun, and Garrett, you're doing a great job answering all these questions.
Yeah, awesome question, guys, and thank you.
Wow, we just got a thank you from New Zealand. So appreciate people dialing in from our very geographically dispersed network here. 6 a.m., wow.
6 a.m., there you go. Well, we appreciate you joining us so early.
Yep. Fantastic. Thank you guys all so much. We're going to go ahead and close this down, but if you do have follow-ups, you can reply directly to the email or through the survey that you will receive here pretty soon, or finally through our support team so that Garrett and the rest of his team can help you out. So with that, we will go ahead and close it up. Oh, thanks from Saudi Arabia. Man, we're just really keeping it international.
Very nice.
All right, guys, thank you so much and have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, and everything.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Saudi Arabia, Florida.
That's cool. We're good.
Yeah.
Nice. How many upticks was that in there? A total of people dial in last minute?
But everybody stayed, which is
Yeah, that's cool.